You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Sick of those trivia podcasts that you don't even understand how to operate and they just have too many levers and buttons?
There's got to be a better way.
Now there is, with Good Job Brain, an offbeat quiz show and trivia podcast that makes learning new things easy and fun.
I just learned that artificial vanilla flavoring sometimes comes from the anal glands of a beaver, and now I can never shake that mental image. Thanks, Good Job Brain.
Good Job Brain is available for the low price of just 4 easy payments of free. It's a podcast.
Good Job Brain is part of Airwave Media and available on all podcast apps. Operators are standing by.
Hold your ears, folks. It's showtime.
People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
I'm Julia Child.
Today you have rock star chefs. Julia's the first.
I think I love you.
Julia had these kind of romantic dreams for what her life might be. She was really pining for adventure.
I did want to be a spy, and I thought I'd be a very good one.
She never looked back.
As soon as I got into France and realized what it was all about, one taste of that food, and I never got over it. I decided that I would enroll in the Cordon Bleu.
Cooking was a world of men.
Women were basically part of the window dressing.
You certainly didn't see them teaching.
I'm Julia Child. Welcome to the French Chef.
She changed everything.
She really knew what she was doing. Terrific technique.
She just seemed so unpretentious.
Well, that didn't go very well.
She was giving you this opportunity to say, don't be afraid of failure.
And here it is.
When you cook, you give your love. God knows it's a love affair with Paul.
Julia's advice for a good marriage was the 3 F's. Feed your man, flatter your man, and you had to your man.
Julia Child presents the Chicken Sisters.
They were sort of easing her out. She said, forget it, I'm done. And she quit.
Julia was a dynamic force that would not be silenced.
Darling, we're going to have so much fun.
Julia was more than a cook. She was a cultural force. She changed America.
We need to tell how important this woman is, will be.
You could say Julia, and everybody knew it was Julia Child.
This is Julia Child. Bon appetit.
Welcome to a special episode of the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. On this episode, I am talking with 2 people behind the recent documentary Julia, all about Julia Childs. First up, we'll hear from editor Carla Gutierrez, and after that, we'll hear from cinematographer Claudia Raschke. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and bon appetit. How did you become an editor?
I went to film school, and I really wanted to get into documentary filmmaking. And at film school, I discovered I did not like production at all. It gave me a stomachache, and I love being in the edit room. And I found out that a lot of people get nervous in the edit room, but it's a challenge that just makes me thrive. I like the stress of, trying to find the story and having a hard time finding the story. But it's just, I love the process. The process just feeds me with energy as well, as much as I'm trying to feed the structure into the story and make something happen. Yeah.
Not to be indelicate, but when did you go to film school?
I was there 2003 and 2004, or I graduated 2003 or 4. I don't remember when. And I went to the Stanford documentary program. It's a very small program. There's only 8 of us in each class. It's 2 classes. And it's all about documentaries. You sleep, breathe, eat, dream about documentaries for 2 years. So I loved it. Yeah, it was great.
That sounds amazing. What kind of stuff were they teaching you and showing you?
You come out of the program being trained to, if you need to just make a film on your own as an independent, you can do every aspect of the filmmaking. They teach you how to discover your voice as a storyteller. That's really, and then you're just watching a lot of documentaries and you make 4 short films throughout the years. And then after that, I actually was very lucky that I ended up working with very experienced editor and a very generous editor who really taught me how to think about long form storytelling, like long form, feature documentaries, because I had been working only on shorts during film school. To me, that was part of my education as well, just having somebody mentor me and, keep teaching me the craft of editing. That was very essential to my development, I think.
With you going to school in 2003 to 2005, did you ever edit on film, or has it always been offline?
Just for one small project, but the very first project, I actually physically cut the film. To me, that was the best exercise on discipline that I got, because you really have to think, because things take so much longer to, let's try 2 frames here and 2 frames there. It just takes a long time to do those changes. So you really have to think, like, why am I making this cut? How does this decision affect the entire scene? It makes you really think about, like, the reasons of your decisions, which sometimes with, computers, it's just like so quickly to change that you're not thinking so much about why you're cutting things or why you're trying things. I carry that over to the way that I edit now, even though it's so much faster.
How do you even keep track of the shape of the story? Because I always think of an editor as being the person that helps shape things. You're talking about long form editing, like keeping all of those pieces and parts in your mind in order to tell that larger story. That's going to be really difficult to even just have that ability to keep track of all that stuff.
That's at the heart of our craft, especially for documentary editors. We are very much part of the writing team of the film. Like, we are finding the script of the film in the edit itself. That's one of the most important parts, besides making it look pretty or making it look energetic, or how, kind of like the rhythm of how you're cutting, really the big pieces of the film and how they fit together, like the structure of the film, really the narrative arc of the film. Like, that's where everything comes from, that, right? The intention of the film. I mean, the way that I work is, our teams always like step back and look at the big picture all the time. Like, every day we think about the big picture, because the big picture determines the decisions that we're going to make on a smaller scale for each scene. And that's the part I really love, is like how to think about, like, if something is going to have a climax or something is going to play out in a very special way, part of somebody's journey, you have to set it up. You have to set up the motivation of a character, everything. Very opening of the film has to set things up for you, or has to do a lot of stuff for you. So like everything, like from, minute 0 to like minute 95, it all has to be interconnected, and it all has to be talking to each other, because you need that build up for things to like play out the way you want them to once you hit that like big moment of the film. So, we use index cards for Julia. We were able to look at the structure of the film virtually. I think it's called Jamboard that we use, Google Jamboard. Other people use other software. I love putting things on the wall. And yes, and always like looking, like always stepping back and being able to watch the entire film and how things are speaking to each other is essential, because you can get lost in the one scene sometimes, and you always have to come out of it and look at the big picture.
What's your relationship like when it comes to your directors on films?
It's awesome. When the collaboration works great. The relationships between documentary directors and editors is a very intimate one. It's kind of like you're getting married to somebody temporarily, and you're making this baby. So there needs to be a lot of trust. And when there is trust and, openness to like, speak freely and share ideas and listen to each other, the collaboration is just usually really strong and beautiful. And I've just been lucky. Like, thankfully, Julie and Betsy brought me back to edit another film of theirs. And particularly in this film, and actually, when we edited RBG, because that's the film that I collaborated with them on before Julia, we laugh a lot together. And we enjoy the process because making films are, especially with documentaries, they're very difficult to put together. So you just have to kind of trust the process and have fun with it. Like, you can't take everything so seriously or get too stressed about it. Things will be done. The film will be made, and it was going to be a difficult ride, but let's just, laugh and let's get to know each other.
When you're on a film like Julia, I mean, you've got all that archive footage that you can use, probably different varying quality of archive footage throughout. You've got the interviews. I don't imagine that you're getting everything delivered to you all at one time, saying like, here you go. Carla, here's everything that you possibly need. Now go find the film.
Yeah, no, it's a back and forth between, especially with an archival footage, because you can always go shoot. I mean, with archival, it's just collecting the archival, right? But that's always available to you because you can always go find more footage for your film. Different than the limitation of like having to maybe shoot an event, right? That's all you get from that. It's a constant process, and my process informs the collection of archival, and also the collection of archival informs my process. So it's, it's very fluid that way. Sometimes from the interviews, that there's a moment in the interviews that is important to the story. And also, the way that people talked about it in the interviews, you can even see it in your head. Like the first scene that we edited for Julia was the anecdote of the very first time she was in front of a TV camera, not in her own show, but in a reading show. That was just like a special moment because we had somebody tell us step by step what happened and how it was just so detailed and so lovely that we edited that first together, but it gave us a lot of ideas of potential archival that we could get, right? It was her producer that was describing what PBS looked like. So that was very dry, and they usually only had professors like doing lectures on PBS. His description of it informed what we were going to look for in the archival. And that was really fun to to be able to see those professors and, being super dry on TV. And that's what PBS looked like. So it's always a very fluid, process, like we're informing each other. With Julia, for example, also the food footage that you see, that beautiful, some people call it food porn, that we have in the film, that was shot pretty late in the process. So that was shot when we had rough cuts of a lot of, segments of the film. And those rough cuts inform choices that they made in that production footage when they were shooting that. The recipes that we were choosing were based on our story. The way to film it was very much informed by the rough cuts that we had, or the radio cuts that we have of people talking about those moments. So again, it was kind of like a constant collaboration that was happening. And we were, my process was informing the shooting, and it was informing the archival research, and all that stuff that was coming in was informing my process as well.
How many hours of Julia Child's footage, the old PBS and her ABC show and that, how much do you think that you watched over the last year and a half?
I watched a lot of it, but, there were so many of the shows that we also had team support, where we had a couple of people watching all the shows, because I watched a lot of it, but I just couldn't watch everything. And then they would organize the shows and pinpoint at, moments that were funny, for example, or moments where she made mistakes, so then I could just look at the spreadsheet that they had created and go to those moments and find them. It was 30 minutes in, this happened. So I had a lot of help from our team, from our associate producer. There were a couple of, I think our archival researcher was also watching a lot of it. So they would guide me a little bit where to find things that we thought were good examples of her personality, or, when she says something funny, or when, like that we knew she did a lot in her show. So we could see all those examples kind of like together. So yeah, so that's how our process went with that.
I'm sure things have changed a lot since I was working on an Avid in the late 90s. I imagine that you were able to just call up that footage once you knew pretty much where the time code was and what the file was. Is that kind of how it works now?
Yeah, so I work with Premiere Pro, and I've been working on Premiere Pro for many years already. Different editors work differently. You can do a lot of keyword searches on Premiere Pro. We just really organize, the way that we were looking for those moments. For example, we organize all of our footage from those shows chronologically. So I could just like really quickly look on the browser, like the date, and just find things really fast that way. You can even like do markers, and you can look at like a whole browser of markers and do like searches for keywords. Like there's so many ways of like finding things. For me, maybe I'm a little old school, but just having like a good chronological organization of my clips on the browser, it just works for me. So, but you can even like find clips on your timeline. Yeah, there's so many ways that you can do searches on Premiere Pro, which is fantastic.
What were some of the biggest challenges of putting Julia together?
I think one thing that we were able to figure out well was that there was a lot of Julia's voice on TV, obviously all her shows, like you could hear her. There were a lot of interviews of Julia throughout the years, but most of those interviews were focused on recipes and food, what she thought about food, right? Only in the later years, she really started talking more about her life, and she was asked more about her life. But those interviews were still limited. She would usually like repeat a couple of anecdotes over and over again. So there wasn't much of her herself talking about her life. But we really did use Julia's voice quite a bit in the film, or maybe not quite a bit, but it feels like she's very present in the way that she's talking about her life. And I think that was just, working really hard to find, strategic moments to like bring her in or edit, her voice in the TV show where she's just like showing food, but then bring her voice in voiceover as well to give us a little bit of insight as to, kind of like the behind the scenes in her show, or the way that she was thinking about it. So in a way, it was a challenge because we had limited material of her talking about her life. I think we used it well. So I've heard from many people that they feel like Julia's voice is very present in the film, that she's carrying a lot of the film. I think that's a testament that we made it work. We made the limitation that we face work for us, and she feels a lot more present than, the material that we had of her talking about her life. Sometimes you face a limitation and it opens up sometimes better options. Like, for example, we didn't have her voice talking about her early years with like falling in love with her husband, but we had these letters, and we had the letters from her husband as well. And so we decided to use that text. But it was, we edited in such a way that it was a conversation between her and her husband in a way, like the impressions that they got of. And that choice ended up giving us more intimate material of her, but not being scared like, oh, we don't have her voice. Using text for a documentary could be scary because you think that it might be dry. But I think the way that we put it together, it was lively, and you got to sense their personality. So a limitation of not having her narrate that part of her life gave us an opportunity to actually be more intimate and, and kind of get into their heads and where they are at that point in their romance. Limitations a lot of times just give you more, like, better things to work with.
Did the pandemic affect you at all making this?
Yes, we had been working, I think, for about a month and a half or 2 months in an office when we all had to pack and go home. But in our process and working with my associate editor, Grace Mendenhall, we are always very, I think, good and thorough in the way that we do media management and set up our projects. So technically, we just, move our things home, but it didn't change our flow. So, the next day we were able to like continue the way that we had been editing. We had to, do more transfers online of like new archival coming in, or if there was like any new interviews, sometimes we had to mail drives to each other. And then there was the dialogue between, that continuous dialogue between the directors and editors. Thankfully, because we had worked before, Julie, Betsy, and I already had established, a common language, and we were very familiar with each other, and we were very familiar with the way that we worked. So it went really smoothly. I missed them a lot. Again, we laughed so much that I really missed having them in the room and enjoying the process together, but we still really did enjoy the process on Zoom. And they set up a daily meeting, which I think was important to bring the whole team together and, just check in with each other. Also, even check in like, how are we doing? How nervous are we? It was really sad because a few of our team members were in Brooklyn. And at the very beginning of our meetings, we would hear a lot of ambulance sirens, going in the background. So it was stressful. But then again, we had Julia Child to look at, and food and like love being shared through food. We just got lucky. Like we were working on a topic that in a way gave us some calm and joy through the early stresses of the pandemic. So we were very lucky to be working on this film.
When you're working, do you work on just one project at a time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If I was supervising or only doing consulting, I would do multiple jobs. But when I'm editing, I'm just only editing one project. That's all my head can handle.
Is the version that I've seen, is that the final version, or do you ever go back before like the Blu-ray release and ever have to make changes or want to make changes?
No, especially not with the way that Julie and Betsy work. I always joke that they were the first filmmakers where I never needed to convince them to cut things out. Like they were ready to like trim it and make it really tight. And for the first time ever in my editing experience, I was the one that was saying, let's not lose that yet. Let's just, see it for the next rough cut, which is so strange. Like usually you have to make really hard decisions of letting things go that might be really important to the life, of the person that you're telling the story about. But letting those things go make the person's journey stronger in film and the emotional content stronger. But I never had a problem with them. So we end up, when we lock picture and it's pretty trimmed and it's pretty tight. We never feel like we missed something. So with them, there's never opening up a film again. But I've seen that happen in other films where it wasn't quite ready, especially like sometimes when you have festival deadlines and you just have to take it to the festival. A lot of times I've seen films that they have a version for the first premiere and then it's different from their broadcast or the theatrical release. Not with us.
What are you working on now?
Right now, interviewing for my job for next year. I'm taking a little bit of a break right now, which is very welcome because I've been nonstop for the past 10 years, I think. I am in conversations with some incredibly interesting films. So I'm excited to jump onto the next one pretty soon.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This was great.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Sick of those trivia podcasts that you don't even understand how to operate and they just have too many levers and buttons?
There's got to be a better way.
Now there is, with Good Job Brain, an offbeat quiz show and trivia podcast that makes learning new things easy and fun.
I just learned that artificial vanilla flavoring sometimes comes from the anal glands of a beaver, and now I can never shake that mental image. Thanks, Good Job Brain.
Good Job Brain is available for the low price of just 4 easy payments of free. It's a podcast.
Good Job Brain is part of Airwave Media and available on all podcast apps. Operators are standing by.
Claudia, I'm very curious how you decided to become a cinematographer.
That is, a very curious little story because I was having my heart set to becoming a modern dancer. And so I moved to, I had like two thoughts, either go to Amsterdam, which also has a big modern dance scene. And then I ended up, however, in New York with Martha Graham, Eric Hawkins, Mary Anthony, all the greats to study with. And while I was in my element, because I had loved dance and choreography my entire life, but I've also done a lot of still photography and printing. Being in New York at that point and making ends meet, I worked as a waitress, and there was a bartender who was a part-time cinematography teacher at Columbia University. And one day I brought in my photos and he said like, "Oh my God, you have such a great eye for composition." And I was at that point doing, black and white photography. And he's like, "Oh, and the values and the light reflections you play with, it's dramatic. It's beautiful. Have you ever considered being a cinematographer?" And I thought, well, I have no clue what he's talking about. So no, I don't know what it is, but maybe you can explain. He's like, "Well, I teach this, and why don't you come with me on one of the students' films that I supervise?" So like, sure. And if you're interested, I'll teach you how to, load a camera, and you can assist me in being, a camera assistant and kind of get the feel for it if you'd like. And I was open at that point to exploring that direction. And I went on set. And it was as if somebody switched the magic switch, because here I was watching the crew doing all the crafting of the light, the sculpting of the light, the creating that magic, and really being at the edge of where reality and fantasy meet. You kind of step into this realm of magic where the actors start playing and emoting and the story unfolds. I was so mesmerized by it and realized that with the camera, you have choreography. With lighting, you have painting and sculpting and creating that drama, very much like photography. And with the camera, you had an element of sculpting, of working with a sculpture. And besides painting, I also did sculpting, and I also did, so dance, sculpting, painting were all arts that I had invested in my schooling. And so it kind of all interlocked, and it was like magic. And so it was then and there. It was like 1983 when it happened. And from that day on, there was really only one direction moving forward. I never, ever veered off that path. Just went completely for cinematography.
What were some of those early gigs like for you? Were you doing more documentary, more narrative? What was that like?
So I started out in the narrative field and working my way up the ladder as a camera assistant, then joined the union, started shooting feature films myself. I had a bunch of student films that I shot at Columbia University thanks to this part-time cinematographer, and therefore was able to really hone the craft on a small level and then create a reel, be in some film festivals where ultimately, there are agent scouts in the audience, and I was scouted by the Gersh agency. They signed me, and before I knew it, I started shooting feature films. And I did that for 10 years. And then I decided that I wanted to explore documentaries because, the hard part about feature films is that you have to have a really great script, really talented actors. You have somebody who has to have a vision as a director, and to make that all work at the same time and then have an audience or a society that is hungry for that theme or that topic, a lot of stars have to align. And so after 10 years of investing, my creative ambition, I felt that I needed to switch, and I wanted something that was more real, where characters were more truthful and authentic, where I could relate, and also where I didn't have a sense of that people were just going to eat popcorn. I wanted to have an impact, like of people having an awakening or being motivated to take actions or at least be more open-minded.
How was that transition for you as far as going from film into the digital realm?
Interesting that you're asking that, because I was fighting it for the longest time. I was holding on to 35 millimeter films for the longest time. I didn't want to touch video. But as it became better, because at that point it was interlace and, there were so many, just as a visual artist, it was really difficult when you start with a color rendition that is so compressed in video and couldn't even see the gradations, where things, no matter what you would do, felt really flat, and the motion was not as it was in film. It was just such a different experience on video, always super sharp. And I remember when I finally decided to join the video world, of how often I would put a net at the rear end of the lens, like the Fogal black sheer net, to just get the edge of that super sharp focus. And then it really made a huge jump forward when the sensors became much bigger and you had a real shallow depth of field, and you could really be more of an artist and craft the storytelling visuals, craft the visuals more to match the story.
When you shoot a film like Fauci or Julia, what type of camera are you using these days?
So I'm a huge fan of the Canon products, and I have been using them mostly. I would say 80% of my shoots are shot with either, nowadays it's with a C500 full frame. And before that, like with Julia, I shot on the C300 Mark II, but all in C-Log with Cinema Gamut. We shot Julia in 4K. And Fauci as well, but full frame. It was a different experience.
How was it shooting Julia for you? What was that experience like?
Part of it is, it was a documentary. It felt really part of what I love to portray, which are women who are feminists, who are strong leaders, who made a difference, just like RBG or like Polly Murray. Julia fit into that path, and I admired her for the longest time because, she is in a way such an oddball, right? She was like a spy, even though that more on the bureaucratic typing element. But then she was just such an oddball in terms of she was 6'2". She was not regarded as somebody who was really pretty, and yet she was, not wanting to do what her family asked her to do. So she went her own way, and I think that always impressed me, especially because she was 50 when she started her career. I think her book came out in 1961, and the year beforehand, she made that famous, omelet on the show to demonstrate how you can improve American cooking. She was just inspirational, because so often, especially during her time or my mother's time, as a woman, you had a predetermined path, and that was, child rearing or being a secretary at most. But really becoming a leader and an example of venturing out and being creative, being a businesswoman, all of these elements are very inspirational, and I felt that just had my name all over it. So I had to join the team.
There are 2 or 3 DPs listed for the film. What were you responsible for?
Well, ultimately, I was a lead cinematographer, and we did have Nanda Fernandez Belliard, who is a French food macro specialist. And his food cinematography is very different than what you see on the most commercial photographies, where he would zone in on something that is abstract and then would pull out and it would reveal it's a mushroom. Although I don't think that we used much of that in our film in terms of the abstraction. The idea was first of having this whole thing, what is this? But then it became much more cohesive of just trying to get to the emotion. What is food? And food is emotion. Food is the trigger of memories and such indulgence that you go into your taste buds and your smells are activated. And that was ultimately the biggest challenge of how can you bring that across visually. And I always felt that the best way to do so is to emulate, as if the smells, as they rise, that you create camera movements which also have that lightness of taking off, of being able to move as the vapors of the foods kind of spread. So I had that as a theme and wanted to incorporate that, whereas Nanda kept very much to the one style, which was being on a Lazy Susan that turned around and then photographing it in slow motion against black, mostly very abstract. Beautiful, beautiful work. I really thought he did splendidly. But there was the challenge of how do you bring something that is so abstract and commercial looking into a documentary? There needs to be a bridge. And so when the set was built and I was asked to do basically the intermediate step of anything that had to be done with hands on the recreation of Julia's kitchen, how do you go about using then the archival that was, of course, deteriorated and with soft focus and sometimes, weak contrast. There was just nothing there to hold on to. And faded colors to that kitchen set that was all in faded colors to match her kitchen, and then go into Nanda's, extreme macros. And so I decided that in between shooting on the C300 Mark II with a 50 millimeter Cinema Prime at minimum focus on the easy rig so that I can do my little moves and be the vapor and be sensual about it and kind of take it all in on a very close and intimate way. And that worked. And that really worked. We used filtration. I used the Hollywood Magic filtration just to give it a little bit, cutting a little bit of that sharpness edge off, because Cinema Primes are also super sharp. And then having, the beautiful sensor, which really is like a canvas to me, to use lighting, and we bathed the food in backlights and little golden reflections. And so it was a tremendous amount of fun. But really, I felt very close to Julia in that way because we saw step by step the creation. Our fabulous cook, whose name is Susan. Let me just...
Susan Spungen?
Yes, exactly. I felt with a 50 mil, with a choice of shooting the food on set in a very verite style, where you're basically witnessing every step, but because it couldn't really be repeated, because once the flour and the butter is mixed together, that was it. And yes, they had, Susan had created a second option for me if I wouldn't get it the first time around. But we had just so much to shoot that it felt very much like as if I was shooting cinema verite and just exploring as it happened. I have to say that I'm also a foodie. absolutely love different tastes and different, cuisines. And so when you are watching everything step by step, you are salivating, it's like, and seeing it through the camera so close up was just as if you were eating it. It was just such a tease. And it was during COVID and we weren't allowed to eat anything.
It sounds like such a mixture of, I don't want to use the word trickery, but just, I guess that's the right word, that and a little bit of, magic to tie all of those things together. It just sounds incredible that you were able to bridge that gap that you're talking about.
I am very happy when I look at the outcome and the collaboration. Obviously, Carla did magic. She is so gifted to find a way to make it all interplay and come together. As a cinematographer, so often I have a concept, I have a mood board or a style guide in my head, and I adjust it as we go, and I keep it it's a process rather than a plan that is written in stone. So it adjusts, and it has to, because it's a documentary. And so often in documentaries, you don't know really what else you will find. And you are, as a documentary filmmaker and also as a cinematographer, somewhat an explorer of the moment. And if you are given the opportunity in a scene to explore, and no matter if it's food or if it is an interview at a location, I do so. And I do that with the intention of serving the story. Sometimes I pull in my toolkit of, oh, no, we have to black out all the windows because I only need that window all the way in the back. That'll give me the greatest shaft of natural light. And then I can merge it all together with my subject lighting and so forth. Or it is when I know that there's a certain action that was happening in the preparation of the food. I know, oh, I need my edge light to come really low from over here. And matter of fact, I need to use a source 4 with a gobo pattern that looks like a window, and it should be lows because it's afternoon and the sun is setting because we're making tarts. It all kind of like comes together for giving it kind of like the right atmosphere so that the food itself or that the subject that was interviewed can resonate with what they're contributing to the film and to Julia's story.
While you're doing this, what's your relationship like with Julie and Betsy, the co-directors of the film?
At this point, we've worked together on 3 different movies, and so obviously we have a great respect and great understanding of what we like and what we can do. Although I have to say that I think Julie and Betsy were really surprised about my food photography, because Julie was asking me, it's like, why don't you do feature films? And as sweet as that was, I said like, well, I actually did. I did for 10 years. And I don't think that Julie and Betsy actually knew that I had all of that in my back pocket, and that I made a conscious choice, to do documentaries for the reasons of that I wanted the films to be more meaningful to me. And I still am 100% convinced of making great documentaries. And these days, Kenny, it is even more amazing because directors are so much eager to get more cinematic visuals to tell the stories. They are no longer beholden to just having the story being explained by talking heads. So there is so much more freedom as a cinematographer to be creative and visualize and even bring in recreations or, abstractions. And so I feel incredibly happy right now with those opportunities.
You said you shot this during COVID. When did you start shooting?
So we did start prior to COVID, but then the food shoot, because it was scheduled after Carla had already done a rough cut and we knew exactly where what would end up. And because Nanda had shot some already in Paris. And then with the complications of COVID, the set wasn't ready, and then we had to wait. Our set was the last part of principal photography for the documentary. During that time, all the health guides had to be followed, and it was quite difficult because, we had different boxes we had to stand in where our gear was, and especially difficult when you are on set with food. Therefore, there was really no opportunity to taste it until the very end, because we had to wait until the last day of shooting, and then Susan was persuaded. You have to understand, every day going to set and you see the most delicious food being prepared and you can't touch it, right? And so we were begging of just having a taste. And then finally she prepared it in such a way that she portioned it, that at the end of the day, we were allowed to take it home. We were just, not able to, as usual, share and, cross taste and put our forks in, all jointly into the dish. That was not possible.
Glad it was edible, because I know a lot of times when you hear about food being shot, it's like, oh, well, that milk for the cereal is actually Elmer's glue, cheats for the camera to make things look so much better.
Yeah, no, we didn't do any of that. Absolutely real. I don't know in terms of Nanda if he used any kind of specialty tricks to make it more glistening in the lighting, because he pretty much worked by himself under supervision, but he was just doing his own thing. Whereas for us, it was just, we needed the process. We needed to see how the hands are really making the food. And so there was really no chance to cheat on that. And you also see it just the way the chickens are being tossed, or how the meat is being seasoned, or how it's being carved. This is all, live and pretty much the reality of how anybody would make that food.
Seemed like the pandemic slowed you down that much. You have, 4 feature documentaries out this year?
Yeah, no, it's only 3. Yeah, but it
only 3.
Yeah, it is. It was surprising to me too, but I also think it had to do with the fact that everything else was slowed down in terms of COVID, and we had started our feature documentaries prior to COVID, so we knew that we were able to finish it up by shifting more to archival and to interviews. And interviews during COVID were really doable. I did 2 other shows. Now I was thinking, what else did I do? But I did 2 other shows for American Masters. One was a Code Breaker, and the other one that came out this year was The Trucks, Ballerina Boys, also for American Master. And both of them are, 1-hour documentaries.
We spoke with some of the folks behind Boys State earlier this year. What was your hand in that one?
With Boys State, that was also a fascinating project. So I'm a co-founder of the Camera Collective. And the Camera Collective is basically 6 very experienced cinematographers for documentaries and fiction, but mostly documentaries here in New York. And we started helping each other out, because very often when you do a documentary, it doesn't happen like a feature film where you have consecutive shooting days. It happens that you shoot for a few days, and then maybe a month later you shoot for a few days. Sometimes it can span over years to finish a feature documentary, depending on the access that is given to you. And so with the collective, we help each other out because we have equal experience and a wonderful way of understanding each other's styles. So it is easy to make a good match. Boys State was presented to Torsten Thiele, one of our members and founders. And he had this whole concept because it was 1,700 campers who had to be photographed. And of course, as a one-person crew, you wouldn't be able to do that. And so he said, I need to have our entire team join, and we will each get characters to follow. So we're self-directed. There's no director with us. We are just going to be self-directed, capturing the character and then reporting back at the end of the day. And so not everybody was available, but 4 on our team, from our collective, joined, and we basically each had our separate characters. And so it was a very wonderful 10 days of shooting for the entire camp, and that's how it happened. So I had my character Renee and followed him around as things escalated.
I have one more question for you. What was it like shooting on Pee-wee's Playhouse?
Oh my goodness. I had the best time on Pee-wee's Playhouse. Again, here is something where you can witness how it is really done, and then you see the magic when it is edited, right? You know that the genie is not just a head, that there's actually somebody sitting in there, and how do they get in and out, right? You know that there's actually a puppeteer in the chairs. So all of these different things of how they are coordinated, and the laughter when things went wrong. And, he was certainly just a normal man. And then when he was on set, he just cranked out that funky voice. And he had his shtick, but we really enjoyed it. We had 2 cameras for Pee-wee's Playhouse. And so it was multiple, always having 2 angles. Nowadays, I always shoot 2. On the last series, I shot with 3 cameras simultaneously. So it seems to, obviously, gives you much more options, especially for a television show as well as for a series.
Are you doing different angles, or do you have one set at a close-up, one at a medium? How is that?
Yes, exactly. So on the last show, I had a extreme wide shot, an extreme close-up, and a medium shot. You have there for a little bit, because the sensor quality, the Canon sensors are fantastic, and the resolution is so high that you can, to a certain percentage, zoom in. And so if you are in a close-up, you can zoom into an even closer shot. If you're in a medium shot, you can zoom into a medium close-up. And the same thing for wide shot. Although the wide shots I love, because all about compositional elements like leading lines or symmetry or diagonals. So you evaluate your framing differently, because you want the eye to float through the frame and kind of relax when it presents your subject. And so that is in natural settings like offices or any kind of space. You look at the space differently when you think about a wide shot. Whereas when you're looking at a close-up, it is often very forgiving, because you're going to have, you're using shallow depth of field, and therefore the background will be out of focus. And so you're working more with color, of trying to get a little bit of blue or a little bit of green to offset the background in soft focus. Whereas, and sometimes I even bring pillows and I just throw them in there just to give you that little bit of color for the extreme close-ups. I love shooting on the 135 Cinema Prime for my close-ups. It's just beautiful, very painterly. But the wide shots are different, The wide shots, the depth of field is not shallow. And so it is the pattern of the space that you need to understand of how to offset that with, your subject. And how does that present the subject and the theme or the topic that they're talking about in the best way.
And this is so much fun. I'm having so much fun listening to you talking about
you're
this.
The best. But you also have great questions, I have to say. These are wonderful questions. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, well, thank you. This has been such a pleasure.
Same here. Same here. I hope I didn't babble too long.
No.
Edible. I mean, not edible.
You're still thinking about that food.
I have to say, if I would have to pick one of my favorites, it would, it would be really hard. I mean, I am a pescatarian, so I don't eat red meat. But boy, that roast beef looked so good. I was tempted, but I ended up eating the salade niçoise, and that was awesome. And then that pear tart was just the best, absolutely the best.
Well, Ms. Raschke, thank you so much for your time. This is great.
Well, I had such a good time talking to you. I hope that your audience will enjoy my little anecdotes.
What makes a great chef? Well, training and technique, of course, plus a great love of food, a generous personality, and the ability to invent hot chocolate truffles. Meltingly addictive hot chocolate truffles. Balls of creamy chocolate filling that are rolled in fresh crumbs. Let's have another piece. As long as the dough is relaxed, it's ready to roll. Ready to roll. Let's have another piece. All in a ball. Ready to roll. Ready to roll. Freshness is essential. That makes all the difference. All the difference. I like to smell something cooking. Makes me feel it. Bring on the roasted potatoes. Bring on the borscht. This is what good cooking is all about. This is what good cooking is all about. Like sour cream cheese filling and the sweet topping, all on that crisp pastry. You can't define these in a recipe. You can only know them. By knowing how the food should taste. A blend of oil, fresh lime juice, fresh ginger, and fish sauce. You need some fat in your diet, or your body can't process your vitamins. Freshness is essential. That makes all the difference. All the difference. I like to smell something cooking. Makes me feel it. Bring on the roasted potatoes. Bring on the borscht. This is what good cooking is all about. This is what good cooking is all about. Cook and keep on cooking. This is the way to live. Cook and keep on cooking. This is the way to eat. Bon appetit. Real test of a good chef is a perfectly roasted chicken. The lemons, the garlic, the rosemary, butter-free, rosemary, full, rich and creamy, suspended in its sauce. So you have to watch it. Don't let it cook too long. Beat it up a little bit just to soften it. Fast and tough and rough. I'm just going to show you how you do it. Beat it up a little bit just to soften it. Chop it, fold it, roll it, chop it. Fast and tough and rough. Freshness is essential. That makes all the difference. All the difference. I like to smell something cooking. Makes me feel it. Bring on the roasted potatoes. Bring on the borscht. This is what good cooking is all about. This is what good cooking is all about. Cook and keep on cooking. This is the way to live. Cook and keep on cooking. Everyone gather around the dinner table. Cook and keep on cooking. This is the way to live.